My name is Lauren Zayu. I've been working on elections and campaigns for several years now and have seen more than you can imagine. From city council races to congressional campaigns, I've done my fair share of media appearances, op-ed writing, and on-the-record experience. Normally, I'm writing words for other people, but this year, you'll be hearing directly from me. I'm starting a new podcast called Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered, where we're going to talk to real people to see how this election's messaging is being received and where it's lacking. I hope you'll join me on this new adventure by following Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Hello and welcome. My name is Lauren Zayu, and I want to welcome you to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered Live. Today, we're discussing last night's presidential debate between Vice President Joe Biden and President Donald Trump. I want to make sure that we're all aware that none of the participants of today's call are former or current staff of anyone on the ticket. We're representing ourselves and our opinions, and because Facebook requires that we label our conversation, I want to make it abundantly clear that we are political. Moving on to today's show, I am excited to get this group of dynamic women together. You're about to meet some of my favorite people in politics to talk with all the things that we're going to discuss today. And they both all know about my desire to do a podcast forever. So they're truly insightful and understanding, and their various locations give them unique perspectives on our political landscape. I am honored to have them joining with me in this adventure, and that they took the time to do so when there's so much else going on. Without further ado, I want to welcome Yolitzma Aguirre, Veronica, Bonilla, and Antonya Jeffrey.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. I'm ready. We're ready to go.
Ready to go. So the first part of our show is called School and Life, where each of our guests is going to talk about some of the work that they've done and how they know me. And so let's go ahead and start with Yolitzma.
Hi, y'all. So thank you so much, Lauren. And I can't wait to just catch up with you offline. But I know we're all comms people, so I'll stick to the rundown. I'm very proud to be from Texas, and specifically from the beautiful Sun City of El Paso. And I think for me, school and life, growing up as a fronteriza, which is someone who grows up on the border, I've had the unique and distinct experience of growing up how we say over here, con un pie en cada país. So like one foot in each country. And that has totally changed my outlook in the world. We share our border with our sister city, Ciudad Juarez, which is where my parents are from. And going into comms work, let's see, I've been an ex-newsroom editor, ex-newsroom producer. So I was a newsie before I went into politics. Then I went into PR work, copywriting, writing taglines, jingles, speech writing, a lot of writing. And then after graduation, I made the leap to Dallas. And over there, I was really lucky to land on my feet working for a national Latino magazine. So my job for the next 4 or 5 years was to travel the nation, meeting the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop of Latinos, just in excellence, from Carlos Santana to rising leaders, new leaders, and everywhere in between. So looking back, not knowing what was about to come in the Latino community, I feel like this was also, we were talking about spirituality earlier. For me, I feel like this was God's protection on my heart, building that armor, right? So I lived in that bubble of Latino excellence for about 4 or 5 years, and then going into the top of, at the end of 2015, Donald Trump came down the escalators and said all Mexicans are rapists and criminals. Day one, which I'll get into later, people acting shocked like he's a racist. Yeah, day one, he said that.
I told you.
And so for me, I've never forgotten that. And putting that bullseye on my community's back, and by default, all Latinos, because white folks can't tell Mexicans apart, right? So, all the Latino community, we now had a bullseye. And then I realized I could no longer, live this cushy job of traveling and attending galas. And I made the leap to politics. And, that's how I ended up in DC. And I'm so grateful because, you know, at least now looking back, I'm so proud to have supported the right candidate, to have supported Hillary Clinton. I'm so proud of the work I did, Latino media and booking out there. And that's when I met Lauren, and we were the two Texas girls. I'm so proud that we were out there together. And honestly, looking back, God, I'm so grateful that we had each other, right? Because I
Yes.
had no idea how traumatic and emotionally scarring this was all going to be in the end. And so I'm super grateful that we had each other. And then I came home after I picked up my heart off the floor in DC. You know, I came home and knew that I had to keep fighting for Texas. So then I joined the Texas 23rd Congressional, which is 900 miles of the US-Mexico border. And then I was really honored to be part of the historic Lupe Valdez campaign. First Latina, first LGBTQ nominee to win the governor's nomination in Texas. I don't know, like, people really don't understand. That was huge. So I'm really proud of her and to have been part of that. That's where I am.
Okay. We're really excited to have you, Yolitzma. You know, I always love talking to you, so I'm really glad you could join us today.
Yeah.
Let's kick it over to Veronica to hear more about her journey.
Hey, Lauren, thank you so much for having me on today. So I can't tell my story without also talking about my parents. They're both two immigrants from El Salvador. They came to Virginia in the early 1980s from a civil war. So that awareness of citizenship and that calling for government and public service was always in me, even though I didn't really tap into it until a little later down my career. I didn't always know that political communication was where I wanted to be, but I always had a sense of advocacy and its importance. So I started out as a technical writer for a federal agency, and that's where I kind of dipped my toes into learning how to write about these really complex policies in English and making it easy for people to understand. But during this time is about 2013 when the immigration reform debate, the gun reform debate all failed in the Senate. And I realized that I have these talents and these abilities, and I want to use them for work that is more meaningful and purposeful. So I went to grad school and I met Lauren and Antonya there, and it's been an amazing journey since then. While in grad school, one of my professors, Professor Steinhorn, I had I wasn't sure exactly what path I wanted to take, and I didn't know if my background in marketing was like the right fit for this, but he broke it down for me, and it's never left me, in that, what are you doing in political communication? You're trying to market a message. You're trying to sell people on policy. And since then, it's been history. And I interned for the League of United Latin American Citizens and the Congressional Budget Office while I was in grad school. That opened my eyes to what it is to interact with the Hill. So the next natural step from there was to actually work in a congressional office. And I started out with Senator Amy Klobuchar. And at the height of President Trump's election and the fight for election integrity and every single oncoming battle that you could think of, Merrick Garland, that really, what a place to cut your teeth. But and then from then I went on to work for Congresswoman Norma Torres of California, who is a Guatemalan immigrant, the first Central American to be in Congress, which meant a lot to me. And we worked a lot together during the height of the children being detained and ripped away from their parents. And it was just, I will never forget that experience and how it formed me and shaped just what it means to be in Congress and be that voice of color and a person of color where there's so few of us there. And now I've kind of switched it up and gone the trade association route to kind of get that view, that full picture view of how advocacy works. And that's been it. So.
Thank you, Veronica. I'm excited that you're here too. And last, but definitely nowhere near least, we have Antonya.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Antonya Jeffrey. I am from Brooklyn, New York. I am the daughter of two Caribbean immigrants, and I'm really passionate about communications, politics, criminal justice, economic empowerment, and however they intersect. I would say that, like, I've always kind of known that I wanted to get into this area, but just didn't really know how. And I think the thing that did it for me was when I was in college, I was in a communications class when I was doing some like volunteer advocacy on the side. to get a final stay of execution for Troy Davis. And ultimately that failed. And that was actually my first time being super disappointed in government and seeing how it can fail you in so many ways. And in the middle of a communications class, I was like, what can I do? How can I use my life and my career to really change the tide for the things that I want? And it kind of led me down this path that had the mix of all of the things that I just mentioned. As y'all have already heard, I know Lauren from grad school. When I went to undergrad at Syracuse University, and when I decided that I wanted to go to American in DC, I was moving. I didn't know anyone in the DC area. So like I was like, there was a bit of excitement because I was in the nation's capital and I had never been here, but also I was like fearful because I was taking like this big leap and I didn't really have a network around me. And finding those ladies in grad school really saved my life. I don't know how I would have made it through. And also we were in graduate school during the 2016, like the early parts of the campaign. And it was interwoven into all of our curriculum. And so I was getting like real life experience at what I thought then was the most important campaign of my life. And then now I'm saying the same thing again 4 years later. But it was groundbreaking in so many ways. So like professionally, I went like in the middle of grad school, I started working for a consultant firm, and I was consulting on multiple different races, including Pramila Jayapal in Washington, which was one of my favorite races to work on. And also my biggest client at the time was HRC and that campaign. It completely consumed me. And me and Lauren would talk all the time because she was also working on it in a different capacity all the time about what was going on. And I remember election night really changed my life. Because of all of the things that I saw throughout the race, it changed the way that I viewed America. And it made me open my eyes to people who were right next to me, who I had no idea held the beliefs and standards that they did. I was naive, I would say. Also, as we recall, right before that summer before the election, Pulse nightclub happened, Philando Castile happened, Alton Sterling happened, and I was unraveling. And then to see that result on election night let me know how many Americans viewed me, my family, people that I love, my friends, and it really just changed me. So I left DC after that, and I came back home to New York City. I worked for a while for a congressional member from my area, doing communications work. I was the district press secretary, on the ground, kind of hearing and feeling the pulse for what people were saying and how people were feeling. And I was there in 2017, 2018, when like the national conversation around immigration like really exploded for the worst. And the district that I helped to represent is the largest immigrant community in Brooklyn. And I saw the constituent services side of how panicked everyone was, how heartbroken they were by the administration. And it really turned me slightly away from wanting to do politics and wanting to do more policy work. After that, I did work for a few more candidates. I pledged that I would work for candidates of color who are pushing the policies that I know would change my community for the better, because at that point I had no faith in the federal government. And so I wanted to do it on a local level. I ran some borough-wide, some citywide races. But my most recent move is that now I am working on criminal justice policy and economic empowerment policy for an organization called the Fines and Fees Justice Center, where I'm directly working with impacted people and just trying to do what I can on the more local level to combat the destructive narrative that's happening on the federal level. Because at the end of the day, I really care about my people and their betterment. And I still love politics. I still love communication, and I hope that I can continue to weave that all throughout my professional career. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, Antonya. As you can see, we have a wealth of experience before us today. And in an effort not to delay anymore, let's go ahead and hop into our conversation on this debate, in quotes. So I guess we want to kick it off. Can everybody, I guess, kind of starting and Antonya and moving around, give me 2 words to describe the debate last night?
My 2 words would be unproductive and cringy. Definitely
solid,
very cringy.
Solid. Veronica?
Disconcerting and damaging.
Yolitzma?
I
think the things I tweeted most were, Lord help.
Definitely. If I had to, it would be alarming and enraging. So keeping that in mind, as you all heard, all of us worked in some capacity during the 2016 election and sort of saw Trump and his messaging happening in real time and the impacts of it in real time. Something I woke up thinking about this morning is find people on both sides for Charlottesville, right? Thinking about, I did think about the day he came down the escalators and called Mexicans rapists and criminals. I also thought about the housing suit that was brought against him decades ago for not allowing Black people to live in his buildings. I thought about all these different moments we've had, some of which on stage. The last one I also thought about was Nasty Woman. When he was on stage with Secretary Clinton last cycle. And I was wondering, there's a lot of fanfare around his comments last night, and trust, we will definitely get into those. But I kind of wanted to ask us or discuss as a panel, do we believe that Trump has gotten worse, or is he being received differently because of who his opponent is this time? And I say that to say that I realized this morning when I woke up, it felt like the Access Hollywood tape. Right. So the Access Hollywood tape comes out, I think it was late September or even October of 2016. And you have, the Republican candidate at the time on audio bragging about assaulting women. Right. And not just women. I mean, frankly, married white women. Right. And that felt like it should have been the nail in the coffin. But as we're seeing now, it wasn't. And so what do we think is, if anything, is different about his debate performance last night compared to how he was in 2016?
For me, I haven't seen a different, he started level 10 racist for me, and so anything else has just been added on to level 10. And especially, so we'll take it in the time frame of before he's elected.
Okay.
Right. Because since then I've had Tornillo, detention centers in El Paso, the shooting in El Paso. I mean, it's been a lot. So dragging the southern border, crisis on the southern border, caravan, invasion. So since he's been elected, I've had a lot on my plate. But prior to, I saw it coming. He's a racist. He affiliated with racists. Everyone seems to forget he was okay with David Duke, Klan wizard over there, and Steve Bannon and all these white supremacists. And yesterday everyone's tweeting like, oh my God, he didn't denounce. Yeah, racists usually don't denounce other racists, So sorry, not to get heated, but no, I don't think he's gotten worse. I think he's the same horrible racist he's always been.
Yeah,
I definitely hear that. Veronica?
I don't think that he said anything last night that we haven't heard at some point in these past 4 years. I think the difference right now is that everything feels so heightened because we know just how much is at stake. We're all still living in a pandemic and forced to pay attention in a way that I think a lot of people haven't before.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you ladies. I don't think that we heard anything new.
Right.
He was unhinged then. He's unhinged now. Of course, his messaging is, I would expect that his team would tell him to hit a little bit harder because now it's a little bit more acceptable. Everybody already knows your colors, go off. And he went off. So yeah, the people who are talking about or seem surprised by anything that was said last night has not been paying attention to the last 4 or 5 years, because he was this way from the very first moment that he announced.
Completely agreed on that. Keeping that in mind, I think we should transition into Hold Up, right? Which we know is something we think people aren't necessarily talking about. So I'll say, for me, I acknowledge the takeaway from the night were his comments to the Proud Boys, which I said we will get to later. But if I can be honest, Vice President Biden made his own waves last night as well. The most notable to me, saying that he is the Democratic Party right now, and so the platform is him. I think that's really interesting. I think it's bold, even particularly coming off of the primary that he had, right? Where there were a lot of people who, wanted different things in this election. There were a lot of different brands of Democrats. It probably was the most crowded primary for Democrats in recent history. We normally don't do the 17, 20 person primary. And so to see him come out of that primary with himself as the standard is a bold stance. I fully acknowledge why it makes sense to him to do that. I think it was a tactic to not have to answer to people of the left, right? So if you are the standard for the party, then when they ask you questions about what people want from the left in different capacities, you don't have to answer that, because for you are the standard, which is what I think he was trying to do. But I do think it was an interesting messaging ploy for someone who is still trying to unite that party and still trying to bring people together to set themselves as the standard. But keeping that in mind, Antonya, did you want to?
No, yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, I agree, but I also think that, and this I saw this happening throughout the debate performance last night. Donald Trump got under Joe Biden's skin, and I think that things that he said is his actual thoughts. Like, he was trying to push back. So he was saying all of these feisty comments. I don't think that's something that his comms team would approve of, that he said, but I think that he felt the need, because he was getting dragged a lot, to be more jabby and to the overall theme that he was trying to do of seeming presidential in comparison to Donald Trump. I think that was a part of that. And so I'm actually, even though it bothered me, because no, you're not. And full disclosure, he wasn't my candidate. I won't hold that against him.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it very much felt, and anyone who's had I'll say an older sibling, and you get pushed around and pushed around, it felt like that moment where I agree totally. I don't think he meant it. I think he wanted to say, I'm going to kick your ass, but he knows he can't. And so when he said, you're being pushed around by the left, they're going to do it. It was his way of saying, no, I'm not. I'm my own man. I decide. When reality, he does, he doesn't. It's a democracy. We're Democrats. But I think he just got caught up in that moment of trying to show him up, and it was like this weird fight between them. And yeah, I took it the exact same way, though. I don't think, had he been debating a rational, competent man instead of Donald Trump, it would have never gone down that way. That would have never even come out of his mouth.
I definitely agree there. And Veronica, did you have anything you want to say?
Both of these ladies captured it, Lauren.
Fully understood. Okay. Well, did anyone else have anything they thought maybe hasn't been brought up about the debate last night that they found interesting?
Yeah, for me, my takeaway moment was the tax code. And of course, we'll get into the racism section later, which I have all my Latino notes. But that moment really stuck out to me because there was so much going on. It kind of flew under the radar. But I remember tweeting, hold up, did he just admit on national TV he hustled the tax code? that was insane to me. It was that moment in A Few Good Men where Jack Nicholson finally admits it. He ordered the code red, and like the whole audience stays quiet, and then Tom Cruise is just like, did y'all hear that? That's kind of how I felt. We've known it. He hasn't released the taxes, but on the slew of the 12 to 16 sexual assaults he has, all the pending tax issues, but to hear him say it, yeah, I don't want to pay taxes. I work the code, and like basically anyone else who doesn't is a sucker, right? So to me, that was like a big takeaway for anyone, because the reality is there's a lot of voters that maybe aren't impacted by the things I'm impacted by, and whatever, that's a whole other conversation, right? But even for that, can you understand that the president of the current man occupying the Oval Office is hustling the people of the United States of America? And like that really hasn't made a big buzz, right? So that was my takeaway.
I agree completely, Yolitzma, that did not get the shine it deserved. And again, in another debate, in another parallel universe, that would have been what was brought out of the conversation. But I do think that matters because speaking earlier, we were talking about whether or not Trump has changed or gotten worse. We know that in 2016, Trump was actively bragging about not paying taxes. We know that, and at the time, people attempted to convince us that that's because he was such a great businessman. Like, he just finds all the loopholes and doesn't have to pay. I think the actual, and granted, Trump did try to refute them. I don't know where the New York Times got their numbers, but I do think actually seeing the numbers in print, also in contrast with how much he is purporting that he's making. We don't know if those numbers are true either. There was like a moment of him actually having to account for that hasn't happened thus far. And the fact that in his deciding to account for it, his account was that the rest of us are suckers for not doing what he's done is wild.
And another thing for me, Lauren, I think that we'll probably also touch on our discussion in racism, but the inability of everyone on that stage, from the moderator to the candidates, to be able to discuss racism in a way that didn't devolve into like law and order and police. Like, what
Come on.
It was such a failure.
Such a failure, especially because when we saw the topics were released ahead of time, they had race and violence as one category, which is already a red flag. Right. Then we get up there, and I do agree, Veronica. I think the moderator is a whole separate conversation. But yeah, eventually it on both sides devolved into a conversation on law and order. And I understand that Vice President Biden is attempting to differentiate between law and order and then law, order, and justice, which is interesting. I haven't decided how I feel about that turn of phrase yet, but it did definitely devolve there rather quickly, and then rapidly spiraled into a conversation on violence and which side is more violent and all of that. It already, for being a conversation moderated by a Fox News moderator with race and violence in one category, it still managed to find a new floor. So I completely agree with you there.
I also just want to add, because I wanted to bring that up at some point. I just don't understand how we still haven't figured out a way to discuss how expansive race is, and that it does not have to be associated with the things that we associate it with. It's beyond me that on this stage where you have a moderator and two people who want to be the president of the United States, that they can still simplify people of color and confine them to certain issues, when we can really talk about specifically Black people. We didn't talk anything about like equity with Black people. We didn't talk about like maternal mortality rates in Black women. There are so many other intersections, and it's embarrassing to me and it's offensive to me that whenever Black people are talked about on the national stage, it's always within the realm of criminal justice. It's embarrassing at this point.
I agree. It is embarrassing. I think a host of the issues last night classify as embarrassing. And a lot of the performance was also embarrassing. As we transition, before we transition into I Ain't Sorry, I do want us as a collective to talk about the obvious takeaway from last night, which was the president giving a command to a right-wing militia, violent terrorist organization to say, I think it was stand back and stand down.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who might not know, is effectively like await further instruction. But especially because he transitioned directly into somebody's got to do something about the left. I think the argument could be made that it was like stand back and stand down, because someone has to do something with that, as though they're awaiting instruction. And the reason I say it can be taken like that is because, according to Twitter and Reddit, that is how members of the Proud Boys took it. I don't share white supremacist propaganda. Y'all know in the first episode, I have no tolerance for that. But what is interesting is the Proud Boys have now included that as a part of their logo, like stand by and stand down. And so they definitely took it as direct command. I think I heard references to it being a shout out. And it's alarming. It's terrifying, honestly, that they feel like they are taking direct orders from the president. And we know that this is a president who has encouraged violence through his supporters in the past. We know that when protesters showed up to his rallies in 15 and 16, he would often, beat them up, I'll pay the medical bills, and they won't come here anymore. And so to hear him attempting to give orders on national television like that, that's definitely a moment that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I feel like Senator VP nominee, first Black woman, Indian woman to be nominated. Shout out Kamala Harris. I feel like she really said it best. She said, it's not a dog whistle, it's a bullhorn. Absolutely. She was on the post show. And I think that was, I didn't even know I could be terrified by him anymore. Like, he's done so much, but that really, it reminded me of day one when he said all Mexicans are rapists and criminals, and the fear I felt where I knew that crazy old racists that were just waiting for this. Like, I felt it in that moment. And I remember I looked around and I was in an empty room, like no one's in there, but it was instinct that I knew he's fixing to come for us. And that is exactly how I felt when he said it again, because it's on a national, it's not like on, somewhere off. It's on a national debate floor again, so that was the same like anxiety, terrified feeling I had again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so scary, Lauren. And we know that this has the potential to happen because we're already seeing people protest, his supporters protesting early voting in Fairfax, Virginia, blocking people from entrances. Like, we know that there's a potential for this to happen. And there's such a lack of leadership, I feel like, from our leaders in general, in speaking up and saying these are the protections that we're going to put forward for voters to make sure that you can get in and this is a fair and free election, and not like it's nothing but voter intimidation and voter suppression, which I know you've already touched on, Lauren.
I had the same feeling of like, I did not know that I can still feel frightened by Donald Trump. And I felt it a lot in 15 and 16. And I had that same feeling that like, I am literally worried about my own life because I know that that's directed at me. That energy is directed at people like me. Beyond that, though, I think that when we juxtapose the way that Donald Trump talks about Proud Boys and acknowledges or doesn't acknowledge white supremacists, but openly and outrightly like talks down on peaceful protesters and people who are angered by all of the destructive policies that he's put forth that affect Black and brown people. Mm-hmm. I just don't see how anyone can say that he is not outrightly racist. And that was another example. I have my own family members who are Republicans and who cannot say Donald Trump is a racist. When we are experiencing it, people who I know that live outside the country, they're just like, how is this tolerated? And again, it goes back to what I was saying in the introduction, that Trump really gives voice and amplifies the voices of people who have held these views and these beliefs, but have concealed them because of how they saw the tide turning in American history. He's rolling that back. So he's empowering them in this way that is extremely destructive. And that Proud Boys moment will be etched in my memory.
And it's interesting you say that, Antonya, because also something I was thinking about is full disclosure, it wasn't needed. As in, his supporters have made it clear that they are violent on their own, right?
Right.
Between Kenosha and Charlottesville and the El Paso shooting and these other moments that have been direct responses to his rhetoric, they didn't need their own call to action. If they were already empowered by the veiled references to them, like a direct reference, especially if it's perceived as a direct call to action, it made clear what his intention is as far as after the election. They will be even more empowered, I think, to take to the streets and do what they have been doing, but in a more organized and coordinated fashion. And that is actively concerning. And keeping just in an effort to keep us moving, I do want to move into I Ain't Sorry, as far as if there is anything, a take you had from the primaries or any type of reference point that you're unapologetic about right now. We can start with Veronica to mix it up.
Right. I think the point that this is so much bigger than the candidates who are on the ballot. This is, what do you want to see from your democracy? Are you fine with how things are going right now? Is this what people died for? Honestly, are you willing to accept this? I know we're all exhausted and our spirits are broken and our heads are bloody, but they're not unbowed. We have to keep on going. We can't give in to everything that this administration is throwing at us and wallow in our despair. This is not the time to let off the gas. Take a rest, unplug, but please come back and stay engaged.
Okay, I appreciate that. Antonya?
I think for me, it's that there are many issues in every campaign that we can be focusing on. But in this particular moment in time, if we're not talking about the economy, about climate change, about racial justice, racial and economic justice, we're not talking about anything, because without viable plans to get our way out of those things, we literally won't be here. In so many ways, this is a life or death type of election. And I've been in a lot of group chats from last night to now where people are saying this is why I don't vote, or this is why I'm not going to vote. We literally cannot afford to vote. This is existential. And in every room that I'm in, on every platform that I'm on, I'm going to say that if you are not voting, you are a part of the problem. And we can actually make the changes. I don't want, similar to Veronica, I still don't want us to lose hope in a way. And hope just seems like a word of the past to me sometimes. And I get very emotional when I talk about hope, but I just can't. I can't let my foot off the gas, and I don't want anyone to do that either.
Yeah, I feel man, it's been a lot. and I'm tired. Yeah. But, you know, as I was going through the topics, I kept coming back to the thought, like, but what happens if we don't win? And so I think, to reiterate a lot of what has already been said, for me, it's just like, there, you know, to decide is to put to death all other options. And there cannot be anything else but to decide to vote, you know, and to get out there. And I feel like this also resurfaces a lot of anger that I had from the 2016, where people were like complaining about, oh my God, well, you know, she's on oil and this and that. And I remember like all these people, and that's my prerogative to still be mad about it. But for me, I was like, but do you understand what will happen? You know, why slash the other 3 tires because you don't like the car? Like, can we just get there? And then we can tear it all up and fix it. But for me, at least, you know, and again, I remember right after he was elected, you know, and Lauren and I we talked about this right before the Women's March. And we were still talking about working in Texas and what's going on. And I remember it felt like immediately it was like Muslim ban and the dog whistles he let out on law enforcement, you know, that he would eradicate like the DOG to investigate unlawful killings. And, you know, and then it was like ban after ban and dragging Latinos in the caravan. And it was so much so quickly. It felt like a waterfall of just shit that I couldn't even breathe. And I feel like, can you imagine that was then? And like you I think Lauren said earlier, like now they're already ramped up. They're not even trying to contain it. So my thought at the end was like, can you imagine? That was like then when people swore they didn't know, right? Like, how do you not know? But okay, people didn't know. And now they know and they don't care. They're fine letting him say and do. The fear that came over me of like, what I can't even imagine that life. I can't even imagine what that would be. And but my takeaway, I wish I was like hopeful like the other 2. I feel so bad now that I heard y'all, because I didn't feel that at all. But I think I was just angry and thinking of voter suppression, thinking of Stacey Abrams, how she should have been governor, thinking of Lupe Valdez, thinking of what's next past this. How can we survive it? And really, now I think I look down to the minutia of like those things that affect down ballot. Who are we voting for? Like, I'll use Texas. Texas Supreme Court is predominantly Republican, and we keep getting voted down with voter by mail. Even, I mean, voter online, you know, even in a pandemic. So they're still making us go in person, and they don't care. They don't care about our lives. And so my twist is like, we're in the shithole, and where do I find these shovels? What shovel is it? Is it on sale? How many can I buy? What else can I do? But I wish I had a little bit more hope at this point. I'm just trying to like do, you know, how do we, I'm not even worried about people that aren't engaged. You know, that's what I mean about lacking of hope, because I feel like if you haven't woken up the first week of his administration and said, I will vote, 42%, right? Is that what sat out last time? 46% sat out the vote. And so if to y'all 42% that sat out, if y'all still on the fence, like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Don't care about yourselves. Care about us. Can you care about someone else's life? Can you care about all the other lives that are perishing in this administration? So I'm more of a yelling at them.
But it's funny to hear you say that, Yolitzma, because, and I'll get into my I ain't sorry in a second, but I want to take a moment there to talk about other people, because that's also been part of the battle around COVID as well.
Yeah.
Right. That, you know, people are, you know, actively invested in their own desire, but not particularly concerned for the people around them, whether susceptible or immunocompromised or whatever. And so I do think there is a there is something in American culture about the individual being what's most important and not being as invested in the communal. And I think we see that show up a lot of different places. But as far as what I'm not sorry about, for me, I'm not sorry that I'm still fighting. So it's one thing to let it go. I mean, I mentioned to the ladies prior, or I might have mentioned on the show, I can't remember, but the Access Hollywood tape, right? I remember in 2016 when it happened, and we felt like it was open and shut. Like, obviously, nobody's going to vote for this man. How could anyone be invested in him? And in reality, they did, and here we are, right? And so for me, I'm unapologetic that I'm still fighting. I will that we're still fighting white supremacy. Echoing Veronica's comments, it is bigger than the actual people on stage. The president has made it clear who he represents, who he's invested in representing, and I think we have to fight this because that's what's left to do. And again, I was telling my sister, I was like, I feel like there's fighting that's military and together and coordinated. And then there's guerrilla warfare where sometimes you're in the thick of it and you use what you got to get the job done. And so it definitely feels more like the latter. But if that's where we are, then it's where we are. And so I'm unapologetic that I'm still fighting. In the interest of time, though, I'm going to segue us into Drunken Love, and then we're gonna wrap us up, and we're gonna start it with Veronica. I know you're a little pressed for time, and so you can go ahead and go first. I want you to give me something that either you didn't get a chance to say earlier, or something that you've been completely consumed by, and then let us know the beverage of your choice on today.
I think building off of your comments on COVID, Lauren, just taking care of each other and acting like a community. We've seen so many people pass away, and it just feels like we're not grieving or mourning or acknowledging any of it. And I can't understand it, and I refuse to accept it. So love on each other. And we're drinking water because we're staying hydrated out here.
Sounds good. I'll go ahead and go next. And for me, something I wish we had gotten a chance to talk about earlier that I am concerned isn't being discussed is that, needless to say, the president is not the only person on the ballot in November. And a host of his enablers in the Senate are as well. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn and Lindsey Graham, who are also in the Senate with real challengers, right? Jamie Harrison is coming for Lindsey Graham with everything in him, and I'm loving seeing it. But keeping that in mind, we can't allow the president to be the only one who goes down. My main concern actually is that everything this president has done has been because the Senate has allowed him to. And in the event that he calls this election illegitimate, or is, there's some issues with election day, that will be on the Senate to discuss. And needless to say, like, if your challengers are doing well, you don't want this election to be legitimate either. And so while we are definitely all eyes on the president and making sure that honestly, for me, the day after election day, as long as we can start referring to him as former president, that works for me. But we cannot let the Senate escape our gaze, because again, even if Vice President Biden wins and we still have a Senate majority of Republicans, then we won't be able to get done the things that we need to get done. So that is something that I wish I had gotten a chance to get in earlier. As far as what I'm partaking in today, I'm having a mimosa because this is a celebration, and I'm very excited to have all of you here for this first episode and debate recap. Antonya, what would you like to give us?
So the two things that I really thought about a lot was I expected for there to be a discussion about the Trump administration's attempt at defunding the USPS, and there wasn't. I expected real-time fact-checking of all of the lies that he told about voter fraud. He lives in a sea of lies, and I just don't understand that. I'm gonna do this in three. So the second thing would definitely be like the only moment that I realized that I wasn't in the Twilight Zone was Joe Biden's direct to camera moments. I'm like, oh wait, we're still here. All of America is watching this. He's talking to us. We're in the conversation. And I want everybody to keep that. Like if we were to do a reel of all of his direct to camera moments, I think that like those are like mini messages to us as voters. And then the third thing is that I need to see a Black woman moderating this next debate. I don't know what Chris Wallace was doing up there. I do think that it would have been hard for any moderator, but I just want to see something different. And I just know that like Black women hold things together. And I want more for the next debate because like going back to the beginning, I said that I thought it was unproductive and that we didn't get anything out of it. So I'll say that, but also like going back to what I'm saying about like voters and keeping us engaged. Like I definitely want to share my favorite Lucille Clifton quote. I love all of the Black women that have taught me self-care, which is the only way that I'm getting through this election cycle. And she has a quote that says, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. And I repeat that to myself often because we don't celebrate the very, very small wins that is just getting through it. We got past last night. We got less than 40 days to go to the election. We're gonna get past that. But we have to actually live and survive to get there. So radical self-care is incredibly important. And that's what we need while we're watching these debates, when we're doing these types of recaps, and for us to be able to continue the work.
Oh, y'all inspired me. That was so good. I feel like I needed to hear that. So my takeaways, obviously, if this was a debate with a competent sitting president, a wish list is really what it is, because this was just, a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum and then a presidential candidate. So mismatch, right? But for me, I think also it was that moment. That was my takeaway that I wrote down. I think up until then, I was laughing on Twitter and I was like, oh my God, can you believe this? What a shit show, But in that moment that he looked at the camera and, I hope I don't tear up. But he said, look at the empty chairs. I think because we just came off of the anniversary of the 23 shot in El Paso. And I think of all the people that have died through COVID, George Floyd's family, who's from Texas, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, like all the empty chairs. The Native women that have also been part of hysterectomies, the hysterectomies happening, all these detention centers. And so in that moment, he, my mom's gonna be so mad that I'm crying. In that moment, I stopped laughing. I remembered who it is that we're fighting, and it made it very real in that moment. So I thought that was brilliant. He looked at the camera. I connected so much that it brought out all these things. He's right. I forgot all the empty chairs when you wake up. And so I love that Antonya spoke on self-care. I think that's extremely important. And I swear I had practiced this part yesterday and I had the emotions under control. I don't know what happened.
We don't always have to be on. We don't always have to be on.
But yeah, I think it's a very real thing to remember those lives, honor those lives, fight for those lives that don't get to sit at the table anymore. And going through, I think that was my biggest, what I wrote down were like the hysterectomies, undocumented families. That includes just not Latino lives, because it seems to revolve around Latinos, but there's a lot of other people that are part of undocumented that are living in the shadows. I had also written Orlando nightclub, which was predominantly Latinos that died in that. And so like just thinking of all the empty chairs, that was really my my biggest takeaway. And also something that like we didn't touch on is how everyone's struggling still. They only passed 1,200. Everyone's been surviving on 1,200. And so to go to your point about like self-care, I think that's extremely important. I think that is what has helped me survive. That's why I launched Nobleza. I feel like the only way I could live through this and combat this and not be consumed by the rage, consumed by the hate, because I was at that point. I was consumed by it. And the only way I could function was to go back to writing stories of Latinos in excellence and try to give some hope, give folks something to read, to believe that we are still flourishing, we are still here. And so, yeah, I think to touch on those points, that was my biggest takeaway, just all the communities that were left out of the conversation. And I don't think we're ever going to get there, because he's not that candidate. You can't have that conversation. So if there's one thing I could leave to his comm folks, we're playing on a whole different field here. This is not going to be about an educated debate. You're just going to have to like pick out talking points and reiterate that. Play his game book the way he did with Build That Wall, which will be marked in my brain and my soul the rest of my life. But I wish Biden would have really come harder at him in those moments, like when, no one calls him out for Central Park 5. No one calls him out for discrimination in housing. No one calls him out for other things. When you have the attention of the nation, just keep repeating it. He wants to talk about this. Well, what about El Paso? What about Central Park 5? Like, repeat it till people hear it in their heads the way they do Build That Wall. Why can't we play that same game? That's what I don't understand. I think that's what it's going to come down to, sadly, because we are also a generation of that we all grew up on reality TV. And I think that's what it's going to be. How can we hold those 8 seconds of attention of people? And so I wish his comms team would really take a page out of his own playbook and reiterate, keep hitting him with that same point. You don't even got to make sense. He doesn't make sense. You don't even know what he's talking about, But I apologize for crying. Thank you guys for bearing with me.
Don't you ever apologize for crying.
Oh, my mom's going to be so mad. I already know. She's upset.
I think, again, crying is a sign that we're alive. It happens at birth, and it's true until we return. I do want to thank you all so much for this conversation, and thank you to everyone who watched as well. This has been a dynamic way to get us started. I think all of you are so insightful, and I really do appreciate your time in being here today. If people are looking for you or want to connect with you afterwards, what's the best way to find you, real quick, for all of you?
Mine's just
the best way to. No, go ahead.
Oh, mine's just Yolitzma.rights. That's it. At Twitter.
I'm on Twitter.
On Twitter. I'm at Miss Antonya J on Twitter. Definitely, I'm always willing to hear dialogue, whether you agree with us or not. So tweet me.
Same here. I'm on Twitter at ESBEE.
Okay. Thank y'all so much for your time today. Again, everyone watching as well. And if you want to see this conversation again, it will be here on Facebook and also on YouTube at the Lauren Zayu YouTube channel. And if you're looking for me, you can find me at Lauren Zayu or and also on Twitter, and then on Instagram also at Lauren Zayu. I wanted to bring everybody's names up just so people can see you on the way out. Again, thank you everyone for your time, and I hope that you tune in for more Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. Have a great day.
Everyone.